It's a long story, mostly because it spans over 4 years of my life. It began during my final year at Ridgeway High, when I got heavily involved in the underground indie scene in my city. My best friend and I would hit up small shows almost every weekend. One day, I received a friend request on a social media platform from a guy named Eric. From his posts, I saw he lived in the same city, like most of the bands I followed, and was just a few years older than me, 21 while I was 18. Curious and excited to make more music friends, I accepted the request. Eric and I quickly started talking about music, school, and life. He was studying graphic design at a local college, and I was still figuring out my plans after graduation. Sometimes, he'd throw in compliments about my appearance or ask if I had a boyfriend. I thought he was cute, so I flirted a little. But it wasn't long before he casually mentioned he had a girlfriend, though they were going through a rough patch. Not wanting to be part of anything messy, I told him he should sort out his relationship and left it at that. After that, we kept our chats to music and school, and the flirty stuff stopped. A month later, out of the blue, Eric messaged me again. He said he had broken up with his girlfriend and felt like a weight had been lifted. He thanked me for being kind and giving good advice. I wasn't sure what kind of relationship he had been in, but he sounded relieved, so I said I was happy for him. That night, on impulse, I told him he should come to my best friend's upcoming birthday party. He agreed instantly. We decided to meet at the tram stop near her place. That was the first time we saw each other in person after months of online chatting. Thankfully, he wasn't a creepy old dude or anything, but I definitely should have been more cautious. It was awkward at first, but once we got to the party, things smoothed out. Over the next month, we hung out more, simple dates, coffee shops, bookstore strolls. Eventually, he asked me to be his girlfriend. I said yes, and that's when things got weird. Not even a month into dating, I began to feel anxious around him. It was that childhood dread, like you know you're about to get scolded even if you've done nothing wrong. He wasn't outright mean, but his vibe was off. He insisted on seeing me every single day, never invited me to his place, and when he came over to mine, he refused to leave my room. He would just sit there, staring at me, not saying a word. It didn't feel romantic, it felt claustrophobic. So when he accidentally sent me song lyrics clearly meant for his ex, I took it as my chance. I told him maybe we rushed into things and should just be friends. That night, he called me 40 times. The next morning at school, I got a text. "When will you be home?" "I'm coming over." I told him not to, that it was over and we'd only dated a few weeks. It wasn't that deep. But when I got home late that evening, Eric was standing in front of my house. My brother said he'd been there for over 4 hours. I tried to handle it myself. When I went outside, he launched into this monologue about how we were destined to be together, how I should move in with him. He had our entire future mapped out, finishing school, getting jobs, starting a business, having a child by the time I was 22. I told him he was being delusional. I was 18, not ready for any of that. He looked like he might cry but didn't, more like a creepy performance than real emotion. I told him it was over and ran back inside. After that, he started messaging my friends, even ones who didn't know him, begging them to tell me we belonged together. He posted strange, ominous poems on social media like, "You can't see me in the dark, but I can always see you." When I answered his calls, he would scream, "I need you," over and over. If someone else answered, he'd just hang up. This went on for months. I didn't go to the police. Where I'm from, Brighton Hill, a smaller city in the UK, calls like that don't usually get taken seriously. Over time, the calls slowed down, but the messages didn't stop. He even started dedicating songs to me on a local radio station popular among indie fans. A particularly creepy one was when he dedicated Cold Walls to me. It was clear what he was implying. Things reached a boiling point a year ago at a show. I was with my best friend again, and we were chatting with a musician I was casually interested in. Suddenly, Eric appeared out of nowhere, this time with a girl he introduced as his cousin. They sat down across from us like it was totally normal. I froze. He reached for my hair and said, "You look beautiful as always." I quickly told him I was there with someone, and he should go. He ignored me and started folding a napkin into a rose. His cousin, who had been glued to her phone, suddenly grabbed my arm tightly. I tried to pull away, but she didn't let go until Eric shoved the paper flower into my hand. That's when I snapped. I smashed the flower on the table and told him he wasn't sweet or misunderstood. He was manipulative and terrifying. My friend and I walked away, but I was shaking. Later that night, screaming erupted inside the venue. Bottles shattered, tables overturned. It was Eric. Security restrained him, while his cousin yelled unintelligibly at the guards. As they dragged him out, he screamed at me, "You ruined my life." The crowd assumed he was high. I hadn't seen him violent before. It scared me. Now I live in Tokyo, trying to start fresh. But a few months ago, on my birthday, a large bouquet arrived at my apartment. The note read, "I should have given you real roses instead of paper. Happy birthday, my love." I grew up in a small coastal town in South Florida. It was one of those places where people go to retire, fish on the weekends, and drink lemonade on their porches. Quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where everyone knew each other and nothing major ever happened. A few houses down from mine lived a family that really stood out. While most of us lived in modest homes, theirs was like a mini mansion, fancy cars, high fences, and they always had something going on. Their kids were friendly, especially the youngest girl. We all called her Lily. She was about 5 when I was 11, and she'd spend hours at my place. It didn't matter if it was a school night. Lily would stay out late playing, sometimes not heading home until almost midnight. My mom and a few neighbors were a bit concerned, but since it was such a quiet town, no one thought anything bad could happen. When Lily turned 6, her parents threw a massive birthday party. There were inflatable slides, music, and even cotton candy machines. Every kid on the block was invited, except me. My parents didn't let me go. I never really got a straight answer, but I think it had something to do with my mom not trusting Lily's mom. I remember hearing all the kids laughing and playing next door while I sat on my porch alone, feeling left out. But after the party, things went back to normal. Lily and her siblings would come around again, and we'd play until the streetlights turned on. One afternoon, we were talking about our parents and what they did for work. None of Lily's siblings really knew what their dad did, just that he traveled a lot and was always on business calls. We didn't think much of it. Then one night, everything changed. We were playing tag near the mailbox when we heard these loud bangs coming from Lily's house. The sound echoed through the street, and within seconds, our moms were screaming for us to come inside. Mine pulled me in by the arm and locked the door. A few of us kids huddled inside my living room, scared and confused. My next-door neighbor, who was a local sheriff, rushed toward Lily's house with his badge and flashlight. Just minutes later, we saw a black SUV speed down the road, barely missing a dog. Men in dark clothes got out and ran into Lily's yard. No one let Lily or her siblings leave their homes. It was total chaos. Within 20 minutes, flashing red and blue lights filled the street. Police cars, ambulances, detectives. It was like a scene from a movie. And then, just like that, Lily and her family were gone. For weeks, their house sat empty. But strange men in suits started showing up at people's doors, asking questions about the family. Nobody said anything. Even when the police came to ask me about Lily, I couldn't help much. I was just a kid who liked video games more than grown-up drama. Years passed, and the memory faded. But one day, when I was in college, I ran into that same sheriff neighbor. I asked him what had actually happened. He looked around, lowered his voice, and said, "That night was worse than anyone knew." Turns out, Lily's dad was involved in something serious. He was part of a major trafficking ring and had been talking to federal agents, offering to expose some very dangerous people. Before he could finish the deal, someone found out. The men in the black SUV weren't just intruders, they were there to silence him. Lily's father didn't survive. Her mother was badly injured but lived. As for the kids, They were quietly relocated, put into protective programs. One of the older boys was found days later, far from our town. It wasn't a good ending. I still think about Lily sometimes. I hope she's safe, wherever she is. That night changed everything in our little town. From then on, we all locked our doors a little earlier and didn't assume peace meant safety. This is a real situation that's unfolding right now, but it all started on what should have been a normal birthday. I've already gone to the authorities, but I'm also curious to hear what others think. It's honestly been terrifying. Quick backstory. I'm 28 years old and live with my female roommate and her boyfriend. My roommate's name is Tessa. About a year ago, Tessa and I used to hang out at a low-key local cafe. There, we met a woman working the counter who was around our age. I'll call her Rita. After a while, Tessa and I stopped going there, but I stayed friendly with Rita. We weren't best friends or anything, but we'd meet up now and then, and she was supportive of my small business. She even gave me little gifts and invited me to events from time to time. She was nice, or so I thought. On my birthday, Rita posted a picture of me on her socials. Shortly after, I got a message from an unfamiliar account asking if I'd be open to talking about a film project. I was intrigued, so I replied. The conversation quickly spiraled into them offering me a role in what turned out to be an adult film. They claimed it was a secret project sold overseas, and that I'd never be seen by anyone I knew. They offered a hefty payment. I turned it down, but they were persistent. I looked up the supposed production company. Nothing. The profile had no digital footprint, no links, no credentials, no way to verify them. Still, they pushed me to speak to a woman named Kelly, who they said had done the work and could vouch for them. My curiosity got the better of me. I texted this Kelly. At first, she was upbeat and friendly, but then she started talking about the job with an almost unnatural level of excitement. She said I was lucky, and that this director only invited a select few. I thought to myself, no one talks about adult films this way. It felt rehearsed, staged. I blocked her. The original guy messaged me again. I told him I talked to his reference, declined again, and then blocked him too. I felt embarrassed I even entertained it for a moment. Then things got weirder. A few days later, Tessa showed me a message she got on her private number. Same pitch, same weird vibe. They told her she must have signed up for something, which she definitely didn't. What's creepier is that only a few people know us both well enough to link our names and personal numbers. That got us both uncomfortable fast. Over the next 4 months, I'd still get texts from different numbers. Some were friendly, some more pressuring. They never asked for explicit photos or personal information, just for me to consider the opportunity, and maybe meet for a drink to discuss it in person. It was relentless. Then yesterday, things escalated again. Rita sent me a message on social media, a group chat with my business account, herself, and a guy named Leo. She said he runs high-end retreats and needs someone to organize team-building exercises at a resort about an hour from me. She made the introduction and left the chat. I thanked him and asked for more info. Privately, Rita messaged me saying she used to casually see Leo, and that he's financially set, owns a few companies, and used to be in the adult film business but supposedly left that behind. Now, she claimed, this event was purely professional and unrelated. I asked Leo what company he was with and whether he had a website. He told me it was a new business he just acquired and would launch its website at the retreat. Then, confusingly, Rita told me it wasn't a launch. It was a farewell party for a company he was selling. She said I should bring my boyfriend since it'd be all expenses paid. Later, Leo messaged me apologizing if things felt off and said Rita was coming to visit him that night for drinks. I didn't respond. In the morning, I sent Leo a screenshot of the original creepy message from months ago and asked if it was him. He replied with a casual thumbs up and left the chat. Months earlier, I had told Rita about the weird messages I was getting. She said she had also received strange texts before, but that they stopped once she threatened police action. She gave no more details. I didn't pry. Now, I messaged Rita directly. I told her I was starting to feel like the person behind the messages might be someone we know, possibly even someone close to us. Her response? Weirdly defensive. She asked about the old account, but then ended the conversation quickly, saying she was going to sleep. The next morning, she called, but I ignored it. She texted me saying, that was really weird last night. Call me if you want to talk. I didn't answer. Later that day, she followed up with another, okay, message. Finally, I texted her back and said something along the lines of, I've been scared for months. I feel like someone's trying to set me up, or worse, abduct me. Now, I'm starting to wonder if you're involved, whether you realize it or not. She replied that while she understood the experience was scary, I was overreacting. She said she was offended that I'd even think that about her. Her message ended with her saying she lives an honest life and doesn't need to be dragged down by false accusations. Here's the thing though. A few days ago, I had a scary thought. You can use some free facial recognition tools online to search public images of someone. I ran Rita's photo through one and found what I'm 99% sure were thumbnails of her in adult films. Either it's her or someone who looks exactly like her, because those search tools also pulled up known photos from her social media. I didn't say anything about that to her, but that last message she sent me hits differently now. So that's where I'm at. I hope nothing happens to me. I've done everything I can. I'm not someone who's easily fooled, and if anyone thinks I'm an easy target, they're in for a rude awakening. I recently celebrated my 18th birthday, a milestone that finally convinced my father to let me have a night out without a curfew. In our state, adults over 18 have no restrictions, so I was thrilled. The story begins with my partner, Ben, and me heading to our friend Leo's 18th birthday celebration. Leo had managed to persuade his parents to leave him with the house for the night, promising no forbidden substances. Of course, his older sibling helped acquire some drinks. After Leo's parents departed, others brought their own provisions, mostly herbal. Leo's residence was just a minute's drive from my own, a mere 10-minute stroll. Our neighborhood, established in the 1970s, featured modest homes, so I understood Leo's desire to limit the guest list. He enforced a strict no strangers rule. Plus ones were only permitted if you were dating them and cleared it with Leo, or if Leo already knew the person. As Ben and I had assisted Leo in planning and sending out invitations, we arrived early to help with preparations. Between us, we probably sent out 15 invites each, not including anyone Leo's brother might have asked. When people started to arrive, it wasn't long before Leo began distributing drinks. Around 50 to 60 people showed up, far more than Leo initially intended, but many had brought plus ones. Still, everyone present was either a friend of Leo's brother or someone from our high school or a former student. There were plenty of shared acquaintances. There was only one individual I didn't recognize, a guy who showed up later in the evening when most people were quite relaxed and Leo's brother had stopped monitoring the entrance. This fellow wore a worn baseball cap, a scruffy beard, a local sports team's shirt, and casual shorts with what looked like canvas shoes. He seemed only slightly older than the rest of us and blended in well. I probably wouldn't have noticed him if I hadn't accidentally stumbled into him after fetching another drink. My drink spilled onto his shirt, and I felt genuinely bad. Even in my hazy state, I remember profusely apologizing and leading him to the kitchen for napkins. He seemed quite laid back about the incident, repeatedly assuring me it was no trouble. We even exchanged pleasantries when he noticed my alternative band t-shirt, asking about my favorite album. I should mention that I often lean towards a more alternative style, sometimes even gothic. That night, I was feeling particularly gothic, sporting the band shirt, a dark skirt, fishnet stockings, and platform boots. I had dramatic eyeliner and some metal accessories. When I dress like this, it's rare for guys to approach me, except for the occasional alternative rock fan or a mellow individual neither of whom is my usual type. I'm drawn to the more academically inclined, robust types who wear plaid, like my boyfriend, Ben. Given this, I didn't find our brief chat with this random guy odd, nor did I think he was trying to flirt. He was mostly asking about my music taste. However, the conversation then veered into more personal territory. He started asking things like, "Do you live nearby? Did you come with someone? How old are you? What's your name? How much have you had to drink? Do you have a significant other?" In my state, I recall thinking his questions were a bit intrusive, but I didn't dwell on it. I tried to answer vaguely, though honestly, I can't say how successful I was given my condition. Then, out of nowhere, he asked if I was unattached, an incredibly personal question that immediately unnerved me, especially since he appeared completely sober. It suddenly struck me that I hadn't even caught his name. Trying to deflect and change the subject, I asked him his name. He told me it was Alex. I didn't know anyone named Alex, nor had I sent an invitation to anyone with that name. I assumed he was one of Leo's brother's friends. He then reiterated his question. "So, are you unattached?" I remember in my disoriented state, I gave an awkward laugh. I really didn't want to answer this Alex guy. I suddenly wanted nothing more to do with the conversation. My escape came when another mutual friend of Ben and mine, named Sam, came over to refill his drink. He spotted me, called my name, and high-fived me, then mentioned that Ben was looking for me. I quickly excused myself from Alex, and as I did, he shot Sam a subtle, displeased look, as if to say, "You just interrupted us." Sam didn't even acknowledge him, continuing to tell me where Ben was. Once I found Ben, the night seemed to normalize. Ben and I, now quite tipsy, danced for a while and took more sips throughout the night. That is, until I began to notice that every room I entered, Alex was there too, always observing me or glancing in my general direction. I hadn't seen him drink anything even once. I tried to dismiss it as a coincidence, thinking it was just a chance that he was always in the same room as me. But now, in retrospect, that was foolish. If it feels like someone is watching you, they probably are. Later in the evening, when many guests had departed and most others were asleep, Ben and I decided to slip away to the spare bedroom. Believing we had secured the door, we started to get comfortable. After we finished, I collapsed on top of Ben. I then turned my head to rest it in the crook of his neck, which put my gaze towards the door. That's when I noticed it was slightly ajar. Even in our state, I was certain one of us had closed it. Squinting to focus, I realized, to my horror, that someone was peering into the room through the crack. I screamed, "What the heck?" and rushed to cover myself and Ben with the blankets. Then, whoever had been looking in opened the door completely and apologized. It was Alex. He claimed he was sorry, that it wasn't what it looked like, and that he had just been searching for the restroom. Even intoxicated, I knew this was a lie. Ben, however, who dislikes confrontation, awkwardly replied, Yeah, that's fine, man. The restroom is the next door on your left." Alex thanked Ben and closed the door. Ben's response somewhat annoyed me. I wanted him to at least confront the guy. I got up from the bed and began putting my clothes back on. At that point, the party was winding down, and I just wanted to go home. I felt violated and exposed. Goodness knows how much Alex had seen, and I really didn't buy his restroom excuse. Ben asked what was wrong, and I told him how that guy had been asking me personal and unsettling questions earlier, and how he seemed to have been tracking me throughout the party. Ben agreed that it sounded very strange and agreed to take me home. It was probably around 1 a.m. My father believed I was staying with a friend who was at the party, and we had security cameras all over our house. While he had agreed to let me stay out all night and attend the party, he made it clear he didn't want me consuming alcohol. If I stumbled home in the middle of the night, he might restrict me from attending any more events for the rest of my final year of school. So we decided to spend the night at Ben's place, first trying to call his father to get approval. His father didn't answer, but in our state, we decided it would be fine to just slip in and secure Ben's door if his dad happened to check on him in the morning. We might have been tipsy, but we were still fairly sensible, agreeing that walking was the best way to get home. As I mentioned, it was a 10-minute walk from Leo's house to mine, but about a 20-minute walk from Leo's house to Ben's. We said goodbye to Leo and a few friends who were still there. As we walked out, I didn't see Alex anywhere, so I assumed he left soon after being caught. As we started the walk to Ben's house, I felt constantly on edge. I had a strong feeling we were being followed, and on multiple occasions, I looked behind us, only to see nothing. For the majority of the walk, we were on the edge of the road because Leo's neighborhood is located near a main thoroughfare. The road in front of Leo's house isn't as busy as mine, but it meant there were no pedestrian paths. This isn't crucial to the story, other than I couldn't look back for too long, because I had to keep an eye out for oncoming vehicles. As we got closer to Ben's neighborhood, the road became less busy and much quieter. That's when it sounded like footsteps on leaves in one of the yards behind us. As I looked back, I thought I saw someone quickly duck behind a tree in a yard we had just passed. I told Ben what I saw and that I thought we were being followed. Ben then suggested it was most likely just a small animal. That's entirely plausible. Our town has a sizable animal population, so it seemed like a logical explanation. Eventually, we arrived at Ben's house, entering through the back gate and back door. I changed into some of Ben's comfortable clothes, and we lay down in his bed, securing the door. I had only just settled in when I realized I needed to use the restroom, so I went and then decided to get a glass of water from the kitchen. I should mention that Ben's kitchen is directly across from his living room, which has a large window without curtains. All the lights were off, and thanks to the streetlights outside, I could see perfectly through the window into Ben's front yard. And that's when I saw it, a person peeking from behind the giant tree in Ben's front yard. I wanted to scream, but I didn't want to wake Ben's father and risk getting caught. It would be an awkward situation to explain, especially since we were there without permission. I didn't know if whoever was hiding behind the tree could see me, but I grabbed my phone off the table and took a picture, making sure my flash was off. I checked Ben's back door to ensure neither of us had forgotten to lock it after we came inside. I then rushed back to Ben's room as quietly as possible, woke him up, and showed him the picture. I had a strong feeling it was the Alex guy from the party. Ben started to get annoyed. He suggested that maybe it was one of their friends trying to play a prank. At the time, I was still somewhat intoxicated, so as much as I knew that wasn't true, I just accepted that explanation. Ben does have a friend who was at the party and lives only a 5-minute walk from his house, so maybe that guy followed us to scare us. But now that I think about it, that makes no sense, because the only way they could successfully scare us by hiding behind a tree in his front yard would be if they knew we were going to be in the living room, and there's no way they would have known which room we would be in. So, it was clearly someone observing the house. I could tell that Ben was on edge, and I saw doubt in his eyes. I could also tell that he didn't even believe his own explanation. I suggested that maybe he should tell his father, but he said no because then his father would know that we snuck over, and he might tell my dad, and Ben would get in trouble. I know that sounds like a trivial reason, but Ben's father and I haven't had the best relationship in the past, and my dad can be very strict sometimes. Plus, he'd probably never let me go to another party again, or spend time with Ben for a long while if he found out I had snuck over to his house to sleep. Ben held me and told me we were safe, and that he doubted whoever it was would try to break in, and that it was probably just a friend trying to scare us. I don't know when, but eventually, I fell asleep. I woke up later without knowing what roused me. I found it really strange since I'm a very deep sleeper. I once even slept through a minor weather event. So, waking up in the middle of the night was practically unheard of for me. I tried to wait and see if I could figure out what woke me up. That's when I heard it, a metallic clanking sound coming from the living room. I looked at the clock and realized I had only been asleep for maybe 20 minutes before that sound had woken me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was Ben's pet, Sparky, messing with her metal water dish. But Sparky always sleeps in Ben's father's room, and she wasn't in the living room when I was out there earlier. Plus, there's no way she could have opened Ben's father's door by herself. That's when I remembered the person behind the tree, and that Alex guy. I woke up Ben and asked him if he heard it. He said that maybe it was Sparky, but I told him that Sparky was in his dad's room, which I was sure of. He suggested that maybe it was the ice maker, but the ice maker wouldn't make the noise repeatedly, maybe a few times, but something was still making the clinking noise. I told him this and reminded him of the person in his yard from earlier, so he agreed to check it out. I watched from the hallway as he turned on the kitchen light, and the noise stopped. My boyfriend looked out all the windows and said he didn't see anyone. He turned off the light and said we should try to go back to sleep. But at that point, I was just too paranoid. There was no way I could sleep after everything that had happened. Not even 10 minutes later, the clanking sound started up again, and once again, I encouraged my boyfriend to go check it out. So he did, but this time I told him not to turn on the light. He gave me a strange look but complied. I watched him walk out into the kitchen again, and again, I watched him from the hallway. This time, however, he gasped. He just stood there staring at the back door for a second, and the clanking noise stopped again. I tried to get him to tell me what he was seeing, but he wouldn't tell me. So I was about to walk out there, when suddenly there was a knock at the back door. It wasn't a quiet knock, it was a harsh and aggressive knock. My boyfriend then told me to go back to his room, and we both raced into his room and locked the door. I asked him what or who was there, and he said he saw a guy with a metal tool trying to pry off the door handle. Then the guy looked up at the window. My boyfriend then said that he didn't know if the guy could see him or if he was staring at him, but that the guy stopped hitting the door handle and then smiled at him, this really creepy smile, and that's when the guy started knocking on the door. I asked my boyfriend what the guy looked like. He said it was dark, but it looked like the guy had a beard and was wearing a baseball cap. I literally felt all the color drain out of my face as I told him, that sounds just like the description of the Alex guy from the party. My boyfriend looked angry at this. Just then, the knocking on the back door became so loud and aggressive I thought he might actually break down the door. I then heard the sound of Ben's father's door opening, followed by the sound of his footsteps and yelling. His father then yelled, "Hey, if you don't get the heck out of here, I'm calling the authorities." Then his father came and knocked on Ben's door. I quickly got up and hid in Ben's closet. Then Ben let his father in. His father asked him if he knew the guy at the back door, but Ben just said that he was some guy at Leo's party who apparently followed him home. Ben's father then said, "Well, after I yelled at him, the guy ran off. He shouldn't come back, but if he does, let me know." Ben's father then said goodnight to him and walked back to his room. When Ben's father opened his door, Sparky walked out and walked into Ben's room. I walked out of the closet, and Ben and I tried to go back to sleep with Sparky now laying at the foot of the bed. Ben fell back asleep eventually, but I still couldn't sleep. It was maybe like 4 in the morning, and I finally felt myself begin to doze off when Sparky then began to growl. It was a low growl, but it was enough to get my attention. Now Sparky was a large breed dog, known for being quite vocal. Well, not Sparky, she barely ever made any noise. In fact, for the year and a half Ben and I have been dating, I've only ever heard her bark once. I had never heard her growl before, though. She got up off the bed and walked up by the window on the far left wall. I watched as she showed her teeth and began to growl louder. Now I felt really uneasy. I woke up Ben and brought his attention to what she was doing. Ben agreed it was really out of character for her. Then there was a tap on the window. Ben and I just looked at each other in horror, and Sparky started to bark at the window. Ben got up and drew the blinds to the window, and it was the same guy from the party peering into the window with the creepiest smile I'd ever seen. With this, I actually screamed, and Ben's father came barging into the room, then ran into his room, grabbed his old hunting rifle, and then ran out the back door. Then there was yelling coming from outside as we saw the guy at the window look behind him and then run away from the window. Eventually, Ben's father came back inside, having chased the guy off. He was definitely upset that I was there, especially since he knew my dad didn't give me permission to be there, nor did he. I told him all about that Alex guy at the party, how unsettling he was, and how that was the same guy, and that he followed us here from the party. Ben's father explained that he was upset that I was here because if my dad found out, he could be quite angry with him. But he said that he also knew that my dad would probably be more furious if he sent me home after that creep had been outside the whole time, especially with him still out there somewhere. He said that he chased the guy with his rifle until the guy ran into the dense bushes across the street, and he then decided that he wasn't worth the chase and that he probably wouldn't come back anyway. He asked if I wanted him to contact the local authorities, but I told him no because I didn't want my dad finding out I was there. He said okay, told us good night, and then went back to bed. Finally, I was able to get some sleep, and as far as I know, the guy never came back that night. But the story doesn't end there. That whole thing happened maybe 2 weeks ago, and the most recent experience occurred 3 nights ago when Ben dropped me off at my house at 11 p.m. after we had spent some time at his place. I got ready for bed, and I think I fell asleep around 1 a.m. I woke up at 3 a.m. with the need to use the restroom. I was comfortable in bed, and I didn't really want to get up, but then I heard the driveway alert go off through the house, which wasn't alarming because we had a lot of local wildlife that would sometimes set it off. After a few minutes, I could no longer hold it, and I got up to go to the bathroom. I was about to open my bedroom door to go to the bathroom when suddenly I heard the garage door now open, which wasn't that weird or anything since my younger sibling's room was in the lower level, and the lower level was connected to the garage. So I figured it was just my sibling coming to get a snack or something. I was going to open the door, but when I put my hand on the door handle, I suddenly just felt like something was wrong, and that something was telling me not to open that door. I can't tell you why. It was just a sudden, deep gut feeling. As I pondered on whether or not I was just being overly cautious, I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. I told myself it was just my sibling, and that they were probably just going to the bathroom, but the footsteps now got closer, and they stopped right outside my door. After a few seconds of silence, there was a slight tap. Again, trying not to overthink it, since my sibling has tapped on my door late at night before to ask me something random, or just annoy me like siblings do. I then replied, "Yes, what is it?" There was no reply. "Casey, is that you?" I called out. Then there was a voice that was not my sibling's, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. But I did recognize the voice. It was Alex. My heart did a flip and dropped straight to my stomach. I then immediately secured my door. My door had a stylized initial on it that stood for my name, so it's not that hard to guess that my room is a girl's room. I knew then that the Alex guy had broken into my house. Then the guy started trying to open my door. Once he realized it was locked, he started pulling and twisting the door handle really hard and banging and knocking on the door in an attempt to force it open, I assume. I screamed really loudly. Now my parents have this really loud industrial fan in their room that they keep on because they both need the room to be really cold, and my dad can't sleep without the noise of a fan on. It's so loud I can hear it through the walls separating our rooms. So I was almost afraid that my parents wouldn't hear me, but I then heard mumbling, and my stepfather burst out of their room. I then hear the Alex guy run down the hallway and through the garage door, followed by my stepfather yelling and running after him. At this point, my dad came running out too, trying to open my door. Upon hearing his voice on the other side, I then quickly unlocked the door and let him in. He asked me what happened, and I began to tell him all about the unsettling Alex guy at the party, only leaving out a few details. However, I didn't tell him about him following Ben and me back to his house. I didn't want my dad to know that I stayed over. I know that it was probably a foolish decision, and I probably should have just told him, but I was really afraid that I'd get into trouble. My dad looked horrified and began to pray. So did I. My stepfather eventually came back into the house, saying he lost the guy after he ran into the dense growth behind our house, just like before. My father and stepfather then began to ask me a ton of questions, mainly wanting to know how the guy found out where we lived. I honestly had no idea unless he somehow tracked me for the past 2 weeks since the party and discovered where I lived. We contacted the local police, and they asked me questions, but the information I had didn't help them much since I only had the guy's first name. For all I know, Alex wasn't even this guy's real name. I gave them a brief description. They said they'd look into it, but we never heard anything back from them. Like I said, there wasn't really much they could do. Nothing was taken, as I'm pretty sure I was the guy's main target. I'm not really sure why the guy targeted me, or what I did to cause him to have such an obsession with me. But I'm sure if it wasn't me, he would have targeted one of the other young women at the party that night too. Well, as it turns out, the guy entered through the back door downstairs because my sibling woke up needing to use the restroom, but they didn't want to go all the way upstairs, so they went outside. But since they were half asleep, they forgot to re-secure the door, so the guy just walked right inside. I'm just really glad my sibling was safe. We asked literally everyone from the party, and apparently nobody even knew that guy. Leo even said that he didn't even know an Alex, and Leo's brother said that he did not invite that guy, but he remembered seeing him at the party, and that he thought the guy was kind of suspicious, but that he figured he was just someone's guest. This was 3 days ago, and I haven't seen or heard anything since. I don't think the police ever found out who the guy was, but nothing alarming has happened since. I just hope the guy doesn't come back.